TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes, to our favorite shows!
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hippo
Scary dog!
Blurson at Blursville.
Futurama!
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, TV Party Tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. I'm also 44 today. You say it's your birthday. It's my birthday too? Yeah. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. And to Robert Winfree. How you doing, Robert?
I was wondering where you were going with that, and eventually you just punted. So, yeah, in all seriousness, happy birthday. I'm glad you're still alive.
Me too. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
The way things are going, that's a valid point.
Yeah, tomorrow is not written for certain. Tonight, our favorite show is Devilman Crybaby, brought to you by the good people at Netflix and original Go Nagi's manga series Devilman.
Oh, okay.
Go Nagis?
Ow, there you go.
Sorry, I read that quick. First of all, they normally put that information on the side of the wiki, and that's where I was looking, and I'm like, Studio Saru, that's what I should have said. Oh, well.
Yeah, that would be the studio in question that actually did the work. There's the problem with this is a very minor thing, but if you look at stuff that's like a Netflix original, some of the stuff, very little of it is actually just developed in-house by Netflix.
Right.
Some of it is. Most of it is just Netflix gets the exclusive distribution rights, but they have nothing to do with the production at all. So they're again, and trying to parse which is which when they're all Netflix originals, when they're listed as such, is kind of a dicey thing. But
had I done any kind of preparation for this besides watching the show, what I should have said was, tonight is our favorite show, Devilman Crybaby, brought to you by the good people at Go Nagai's manga series Devilman, also Aniplex, Dynamic Planning, and Science Saru, and Netflix. Nailed it.
On the second try, yes, you are two-take Radulich.
I really am, and that's what I'm known as at work, too. Because earlier today, my boss got me a sandwich and cupcakes for my birthday, and the cupcakes, as you know, as with many cupcakes, the frosting, really, really messy. So I had, like, green frosting all over my hands, and I don't, other than maybe, not even then. Like, I don't like messy food. Like, I like even with barbecue, I tend to like a lot of dry rub as opposed to slathered in sauce because I don't getting.
So you don't like barbecue, is what you're saying?
I like grilled. Okay, how about that? I like things prepared. I like prepared on open fire, but I don't tremendously enjoy, let's say, a lot of sauce. So I just don't like. I'm just not a messy eater, and so I'm getting this. So there's no way to eat this cupcake without getting the frosting on my hands, and I'm like furiously wiping my hands after every bite, and I go, God, I feel like what's-his-face's wife, and I'm like, damn it, because that's funny if I could have remembered fucking Shakespeare, and I'm like, Hamlet, no, Julius Caesar, no, Othello, no, and somebody that I work with finally just fucking yelled, it's Macbeth, you tart, and I'm like, right, take two. God, I feel like Macbeth's wife. And the woman...
Out damn spot.
That's the one. Get it? See? Because I kept furiously... All right.
I completely get your joke. Like, you're correct. If you could have remembered, I feel like Lady Macbeth off the top of your head. Would have been great. Even I still get the reference.
I almost said Lady Hamlet, and I'm like, no, that's not right. And I knew it was Macbeth. I lose words these days. I'm an old man. I'm 44 years young. All right, nobody gives a shit about any of this. So,
it's a shame that you and I don't It's a shame that I don't work with you in the sense that you would have said, I felt like so-and-so's wife, and I probably would have gone, Macbeth's? Because I have this gift when it comes to people I spend a lot of time with. I can piece together what they mean from what they say or don't say.
The weird part about that entire exchange was the girl who finally fed me the Macbeth line was like, but it's not red. And I'm like, ugh, comedy is wasted on you.
Well, she is correct.
You two. They're all robots. All right.
Okay, hold on. Of all the people that you're going to be surprised about being kind of concrete about your Shakespeare interpretation, you're surprised at me?
I am not surprised. Not in the least. All
Fair
right,
enough.
so one of the things that, to go back a step, one of the things that I've really tried to do is give you, believe it or not, a little more creative freedom when it comes to picking things to talk about. I pick the majority of stuff. I pick the majority of stuff based on movies coming out, TV shows. We do a lot of comic-related things. But especially with the gaps in the schedule because of COVID and quarantine and all of that, there's been a lot more opportunities to try some different things. And I'm usually open to suggestion from you or Pat, people I trust that generally don't like garbage. So you took that as an opportunity.
That's not true. There's a fair bit of garbage I do enjoy. I just will tell you it's garbage.
Fair enough. That being said, so without getting into sort of the poking at each other that we usually do, you have said for a while now that at least your contention was that Devilman Crybaby was something that you were very passionate about, that you think I should watch, but you thought, I guess, because I tend to be overly empathetic, that it would have like an emotional effect on me, and there would be grist for the mill for us to talk about on a political, social, emotional level with this show. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
As it pertains to you or more generally?
Both.
As it pertains to you, mostly because I enjoy poking you about your personal viewing habits. I know you're not a big anime guy.
Nope.
I also know you are incredibly, you're a very empathetic person. You've learned very well to manage that, but you have, and again, you're not, disordered as far as that goes or anything, but it's something that your ability to empathize with fictional characters and whatnot, if you so choose to, is fairly well known.
Heightened. It's very acute. It's very sensitive.
Yeah. So when you then get into a property that is not just a tragedy, but okay, let's get serious about tragedy,
Yeah.
There's levels of tragedy. I mean, the fact that we open discussing Shakespeare is
quite prescient.
Is further proof of that, because even with Shakespeare's tragedies, you have the comedic tragedies, like Romeo and Juliet, which I still prefer to I can still argue that as being a comedy rather than a tragedy if I'm so inclined. Or, as we mentioned, Macbeth, which is much more tragic pretty much all the way through.
Yes, sir.
So, this one, Devilman Crybaby in this case, being fairly hefty on the tragedy side.
Oof.
Like, it's deals with some, dark stuff. It's very... If you want to get noodly about the argument, I would argue it's not straight up, the nihilistic perspective that some people seem to come away with it, considering.
Okay.
But it is very, very bleak in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
And it deals with, the extinction of humanity. So, light, easy, breezy.
So, how did you come to this? Did you read Devilman? Are you a manga guy?
I don't read a whole lot of manga. I tend to absorb it. I flit in and out of anime depending on the property that I want to watch. I tend to be... It's more one of those things that how do I say this? It's like on my reading list. And when I say that, I don't mean any individual thing, but the state of anime is on essentially on my reading list. I check in, like, okay, it's been a few months. I haven't watched anything. Anybody that I know that spends a lot of time in that space, what are they saying is good? What are they recommending? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like my relationship with most pro wrestling. I'm aware of it, and I try to stay conversant, if nothing else. And then if something in particular catches my interest, I am more than happy to look deeply into it, as the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to this one, no, I did not read the original. I've not read the original manga. I was not even born when it was published. The original Devilman run by Go Nagai is from like 1971 to 72. Something like that. I can confirm that in just a second, unless anyone yell at me. Let's see, the anime was 73. Yeah, the original run of the manga is 72 to 73, about a year. And so again, not even born by a fair margin. But I stumbled across the existence of the IP, courtesy of YouTube. As if you stumble across something in the last like 5 to 10 years, I imagine YouTube is probably one of the cruxes of it.
It played a role.
So, and I was intrigued by some of the visual style. This would be some of the OVAs, not the original anime, which is, again, also from the 70s and very dated visually. So I've seen a few other people talk about some of the importance of the original material as it related to a few other properties that I was slightly more familiar with. Stuff like Berserk, Evangelion, Parasite. A lot of those draw pretty significant influence in terms of style from Devilman and what Go Nagai did with that, and in a few cases, it just winds up being a very important piece of art for the genre. So I haven't actually read it, but as I decided to kind of, look up some of the videos that were related to it and looking at some of the other properties, I went, okay, because I had seen the reaction that, the original 70s anime very much diverges from the source material. In almost every way, there's you could go on for a while about the differences. And so I looked up the plot synopsis, and I just kind of reading the plot synopsis, I went, oh, you did this in the 70s in the pages of, it's difficult to fully contextualize Shonen Jump if you're not familiar with it. It's the weekly publication it's the largest circulated weekly publication for comics in Japan. And it's a lot of the individual stories that are published there wind up being collected individually and then sold as books in that respect. So I'm struggling to come up with an appropriate analog to what you might have done in 1970 in like DC or Marvel to, this other one of these main characters that you've been following, literally the devil, and he wins, he kills the hero, then the wrath of God comes down and obliterates the earth. Because that's not really a thing that would be done. That it wasn't done very much then. It's certainly not much even now, as a lot of our sensibilities have changed. Just deliberately, I hate to say destroying, because that's the wrong word. But if you have a popular property, and Devilman in the 70s was popular, controversial, it's as well, but it was a very popular thing. It did spawn the anime. It did spawn. There's a sequel series. It's been retold several times. It's a very popular franchise, and to just deliberately say in the original run of that, okay, it's only going to go for this period of time, basically. At which point we push the reset button via nukes. Like it's a move that just wound up kind of incidentally setting the stage for so much other, ballsy decisions made by people in that space. There's a lot of visual stuff from it that gets pulled into other. Again, if you watch this and look at Rio in the form of Satan and go, "Oh, wait a minute, that looks a little bit like Griffith." Yeah, Griffith from Berserk is based visually, and in some respects, in terms of like the broad character arc, on Devilman and the character of Ryu. If you looked at the final bits and the two of the primary characters commiserating at essentially the end of the world on the shores of a blood-red body of water, and also saw the end of Evangelion, suddenly that makes a lot more sense too. There's it's trickled into a lot of people who make their living in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Were very influenced by this work.
So let me ask you this. Having worked with you for as many years as I have doing podcasts and whatnot, there's stuff that you kind of do for utility, part of your job. Someone asks you to do it, and whatever. And there's stuff that you're into, but you're not particularly passionate about. Like, yeah, it's fine, it's fair to middling. Then there's like the rare thing, and it's kind of fun for me to watch because it gives you a rare bit of emotion that I don't often see from you. When you are really passionate about something, like, it's one thing to be knowledgeable and you have like a very didactic memory. You have a great memory for detail. You've often said on the show, the problem with me is I know too much.
That does happen to me on occasion. Yes,
there are subject matters to which, like, you do deep dives and come up with things I wouldn't even dreamed were a thing. Someone like me who paints with a very wide brush and knows a lot of things, you tend to know a lot about a lot of things, but even more so than I thought anyone could know about a thing. Point is,
some of that is I've said this before. I am probably very like high functioning Asperger's.
Yeah, you are. That's well-worn territory.
Yeah. Well, point being that means when I'm interested in something, I'm not interested in a lot of things consistently, but if I decide I'm going to look into something, I break out the submersible because we're going to the bottom of the ocean. Like I get into it.
So what is it about this series, and you don't have to talk about me here, just for you, there's a great many things in the wide spectrum of film and television that deal in nihilism and the state of mankind, and a lot of the things that this series dips its toe in. Why this series in particular struck such a nerve with you that you are probably the most passionate I've ever seen you about anything outside of combat sports?
I don't know.
Like, this really resonates with you, and I'm fascinated by that.
Well, it's an odd one. I don't know what I'm not entirely sure I could fully articulate what what it is that kind of spoke to me about this. I am more generally, as far as my like larger personality, I tend to be interested in stuff that is. It's so weird because I hate bad experimental stuff,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But if it's done well, and if it's done well technically, and it's able to kind of speak to me personally in some respect, I mean, there's nothing better than that, and that's true of that's not just me. That's, I think, largely true of anyone. When you find everything that is built for mass consumption is built for mass consumption, and I'm not knocking it in this instance, but the broad-based appeal of
Transformers movies?
No, I need something with broader appeal. Okay, take your generic Marvel movie, right?
Okay, sure. This
is built for as many people on the planet as possible to try and get to see. And they're mostly good movies. I can enjoy them. I do enjoy them. There's even a couple of them that find a bit of emotional resonance with me. And I'm sure this is true for everyone else. But the Marvel formula at this point is fairly well-worn territory. And again, this is not a value judgment. I'm not saying how dare you, but it certainly is. I hate to say what it is, but it is broad-based, mass-market appeal, consumer entertainment.
Yep.
And that's fine. I like that from time to time. I enjoy it. I'm not here to throw stones. But it's also a little bit like the most generic music you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first time you find that that band that maybe isn't, like I don't know, for you, like maybe the first time you heard Cannibal Corpse.
Okay. Something very, very niche.
Yeah, something very niche, something extremely different. I mean, for a lot of people, and we're talking music that gravitate towards the heavier stuff, people still swear by, Pantera's Vulgar Display of Power.
Yeah, that's one of my, like, Desert Island discs. But I'll give you an example, like Ailstorm. Ailstorm is it's a subgenre of a subgenre of a subgenre, and it is extremely niche. I love it. But yeah. I get your point. It's like, I can listen to something like Volbeat, which is definitely a major market, mass appeal rock band, but the first time you hear something like Rumahoy, which is like even niche among pirate metal fans,
yeah,
like, oh my god, this is gold. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, where part of my appeal where this comes from. Some of the other stuff, again, I watched this originally, and I knew, I know the story that the material is based on. I also know that this is not an adaptation in the truest sense of the word. It's a retelling of the story, but things change.
Mm-hmm. It's an update.
Yeah. It's again, like, it's an update. It's a modification. It's just not fully the same story, which I appreciate. This is one of those things that I always get annoyed with when people discuss the value of different adaptations. Anybody screaming that, what do you mean? Why didn't they just film Lord of the Rings with using the novel as the screenplay? Well, for one, it would have been 8 movies long. For another, there's no point to that.
Right.
Like, that's just, you have the book. Read the book if that's what you want. If you're not going to leverage what you're getting with the new medium, then there's no point in doing it to begin with. And I've said that about various other properties over the years because I think it is true. If you're going to adapt anything to anything else, consider what other benefits the new medium you're going to be operating in confers, and figure out how you're going to leverage that to help tell your story. Some of that is trimming. I wouldn't necessarily say the fat, although in some cases it is. But it's cutting down. It's knowing what will translate visually, what you can condense, what you can monkey around with, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was watching this, and I was just somewhere in the back of my head is just as they're after the first episode, like, it's very, very clear that this show is not going to be pulling punches.
Right.
It's very the visual style that the director, who is an incredibly talented man, Masaki Yuasa.
I was going to say, this story, once you realize what's going on about halfway through, is extremely niche and very, the word I'm looking for here, confrontational. Like, this is not an easy watch.
No, you will be. There's some difficult stuff to process as you watch this. Be that visually, be that narratively, all of the above. At certain times.
Like, I use the word confrontational because, like, people don't necessarily watch television and movies to be confronted that this is not supposed to be an oppositional medium. It can be, and I think there's a lot of good that comes out of television and movies that challenge the viewer. That's where the art comes from, and not just the product, if you catch my meaning.
I am in lockstep with you on this.
But there are people who reject the notion that TV should and movies should be anything but a product. They should not be challenged. This is pure escapism, and those people could not watch this show.
Absolutely not.
You have to be able to accept the fact that you're being confronted that this is oppositional, which I liked. Like, I'm a naturally confrontational person, as anyone who knows me. This may come as a shock to people. As anyone who's listened to my podcast or worked with me or is in my family knows, that is the natural state of my being. Even if I'm not being, like, aggravationally confrontational, I am, what's the word a coworker used to describe me once? Passively antagonistic.
Yeah, that's about right.
And
so I don't mean that negatively.
No, it's who I am, and I got to be me. But that's the thing. So I welcome media that comes back at me. Like, you made the joke on Facebook about, like, why does everything have to be a challenge to you? Because it does. Because life without challenge is meaningless to me. To me. I got you.
So, all of that kind of factors in. But I watched this and I went, I wonder if they're going to actually go through with the ending.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the steps in question along the way play out essentially as they do in the original source material. Again, there are some changes, but they're relatively minor in the broad scope of things. It's not like there's this giant character that was left out. It's not like there's this big arc or this big confrontation that exists in the manga that they went, you know what, now let's not.
So why don't we take this opportunity then, as you're sort of fleshing out, I mean, I got the gist of it, but as you're fleshing out what drew you to this specifically, why don't you I'll let you kind of do the plot synopsis, because if I do it, I'm going to take a minute and just kind of do my deconstructionist review of this thing, which was half of it's a superhero show where a guy hulks out and becomes a superhero and kills demons. And then the show takes this hard right where the next half of it is about how, and how prescient given the world going on at the moment, where bigotry and distrust and hatred emerge between humans and demons, which results in the wholesale destruction of the earth. And, oh, by the way, the antagonist of this whole thing was actually Satan, whose point is the Book of Job. Humans are inherently a terrible lot who will turn on you in a dime and aren't worth saving. That's the story in a very deconstructionist nutshell. But I will let you do a full plot synopsis so people get a better understanding of what I just fucking threw out there.
Yeah, it's one of the things that they only briefly mention. Like, if there's one thing that I kind of would have liked them to do a little bit deeper on in this show as it pertains to Satan is, believe it or not, his motivation. He's trying to rebuild his army to challenge God again.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of what's going on there, and it winds up being just
it's muddled.
There's a single line that's relatively flippant in the last episode where he just tells Psycho Jenny at one point, "Oh, yeah, the humans are going to wipe themselves out, but we need to be mindful of our forces because we are going to have to fight God again for our existence once we're done with them."
Yeah, his ultimate motivation is muddled by his sort of philosophical stance. Like, his philosophical stance was very clear, and what I thought was the crux of the show. The idea that this is Satan's army confronting God as the ultimate goal is definitely, like, subservient to this philosophical bantering that goes on between Satan and Akira.
Yeah, and there's God, I don't know how much I want to get into this.
Well, do the plot. Do the plot.
Well, okay. Well, part of the reason I don't know how much of this I want to get into is there's an interpretation of this series, and some of this is confirmed with the greater. And again, Gonagai has been writing or supervising a lot of stories in the Devilman universe again since the 70s. Including some retellings of the original Devilman. There's Devilman Lady, Violence Jack, which is actually just a sequel to this. To say nothing, again, this is a property that really resonated with a lot of people for a variety of reasons, and it's still ongoing the way people are playing around with it. But there's an interpretation of this one where the entire show is just a singular look into one of the time loops that are going on. And that this entire thing is essentially just Satan's punishment for rebelling against God to begin with. He is, banished to Earth. He gains a body, slowly regains who he is, but along the way finds someone. Even in various retellings of the story or various additions to the time loop, it's slightly different. It's always Akira, but he's always a little different. Sometimes, again, Devilman Lady, I believe, is him as a woman. Violence Jack, the titular character, is just in a very confusing metaphysical move. 1/3 of one of the elements that make up Devilman, and Violence Jack concludes with Devilman confronting Satan again, but this time winning. And point being that there's a discussion that this is just one more time around the loop. So when we talk about the plot, is this just sorry, I skipped ahead there. Point being, it's all Satan's punishment. He finally finds someone he cares about. He's able to make that realization that he's capable of caring and love, mourns the horrible, hate-filled actions that he has taken along the way that inevitably leads to him killing the one person he cares about. Wrath of God comes down and resets everything, and we start again, and leading to again the same point event inevitably at the end. So again, trying to figure out which variation of the plot or which interpretation of events you want to go with for this show can be tricky. As far as just recitations go, we follow primarily Akira Fudo, who starts as a young teenage boy, I would argue, almost crippled by his empathy. He just can't be around sad people or sad news without bursting into tears. He lives I think they're in Tokyo, with his essentially foster parents kind of deal. His parents they don't get into specifics, but I got the feeling like Doctors Without Borders kind of thing. So he lives with the Makamura family, the most relevant of them being the daughter Miki, who is another main character and a romantic interest for Akira, but they never really get deep into that in this version. So we follow him and his friend Ryo Asuka, who is, we come to find out, Satan. Ryo has discovered empirical evidence of the existence of demons, which are an ancient race that were almost predated the dinosaurs, that had the ability to fuse themselves with other beings to become stronger, and they existed in a purely primal, destructive, dog-eat-dog, evolution of the fittest kind of world. And they have since begun to reemerge in greater numbers if you take the long view biblically, as we approach the end of days, they start appearing more and more. Ryo initially is unaware of his true identity. He wants to, ostensibly his initial goal is that he wishes to obtain evidence to expose the existence of these things to the world. He and Ryo go to a party, and I use that phrase loosely, that winds up attracting the attention of various demons. Apparently a big enough concentration of vice, violence, indulgences of various varieties attract the incorporeal demons to then find people to possess. Akira gets possessed by a very powerful demon by the name of Amon. But because Akira's strength of personality and will is strong enough, he's able to resist being completely taken over, and instead subsumes Amon and gains his power, becoming Devilman. They spend time fighting demons. Again, the first bit of this is basically a Monster of the Week kind of setup, with hints about the inevitable apocalypse. And we get tragedy along the way as we continue to go forward. Akira's parents are violently murdered by demons. He confronts the one that had possessed his father, and in a deliberately heartbreaking scene. Again, a lot of this is deliberate tragedy. We're introduced to the cabal of demons that are in high positions of authority, trying to influence the world in ways that are beneficial to them. And then, again, towards the latter half of the season, there's a few characters I'm going to skip over, and we can touch on them more specifically if we want to. But as the existence of demons does become public knowledge, Ryo, after having his memories fully awakened as to his true identity, not only reveals the existence of demons, he outs Akira in particular as one of them, and then throws a twist on top. Instead of kind of bringing up that demons exist, the lie that is told is that all demons were once humans, but that the more dissatisfied a human is with society, the more different they are, the more likely they are to inevitably become a demon and then gain superpowers and try to destroy the world, or at least kill a lot of people right around them, sowing seeds of fear, paranoia, mistrust, etc., and sparking global, initially just riots, badly contained demonstrations, and then eventually the end of humanity as we know it, as the conflict continues to escalate worldwide. Along the way, Miki's parents are killed, along with her younger brother. She is killed, leading to, in the penultimate episode, our final confrontation between Akira and Satan goes badly for Akira. In fact, the moon gets cut in half during the course of their battle. Satan winds up winning. He kills Akira, but as Satan lies with his corpse in denial about the fact that he's killed him, reminiscing about their childhood spent together and how much he gave him this power so he could survive the coming apocalypse and they could be together. He realizes what he has done, again feels remorse, cries, breaks down, the wrath of God descends, destroys and reforms the earth, and the cycle begins again. So, again, there's a lot to kind of unpack there, and again, there's several characters that I just didn't mention because we can talk about them more individually when we get into that, but in slightly more detailed strokes than Mark gave, but still fairly broad, that's the show. It's intended to be very much an anti-war kind of piece that man's inhumanity to man is every bit as destructive and damaging as supernatural evil. And that inevitably the only thing that can actually conquer that kind of fear and hatred is love and understanding. And unfortunately for, Satan, he comes to that realization all too late. But that's kind of the plot in broad strokes. Again, there's characters I've left out, there's stuff we can talk about. So, Mark, where do we kind of want to start with this? What were your big things coming out of the show that you wanted to you think?
Yeah, if I had to do like just a sort of 10-cent overall review, I didn't hate this. Number one, I know that was a big concern of yours that I was just going to come on here and be like, why would you do this to me? No, I liked how challenging the show could be. I'm not a huge anime fan to begin with, and I was thinking about this after the show was over. I think because of the nature of it being an anime, I had a hard time relating to... I had a hard time empathizing, not relating. I had a hard time empathizing with the characters. the style that animes tend to be in, which is very long in tooth, very dialogue heavy, and very stilted, and that might just be a Japanese to English translation issue.
Yeah, some of that is. Some of that's the. You mentioned some of it being dialogue heavy. That's because it's easier and cheaper from an animation perspective to do static images and then just deal with the dialogue rather than animate a glorious action scene.
So a story that talks about humanity to man is something that does resonate with me and something I tend to empathize with. It's why I had such difficulty coming out of Joker, because Joker felt real to me. Up until the very end where it kind of goes off the rails. The idea of, somebody who's dealing with a broken system, mental illness, passive and aggressive abuse, both by his family and by the world at large. These are all things that touch me deeply, and these are things that I deal with on a daily basis in the profession, my chosen profession. And it's funny because I remember coming out of Joker, and I sat in my car and I cried for a while. Like, it really, I was overwhelmed with how sad that movie was, for me at least. And I started thinking about Akira and your perception of me, somebody being overly empathetic, and I'm like, okay, I get why he thinks this tracks with me, because in a lot of ways I can be kind of like Akira in that sense, to where I just get overwhelmed with emotion over something happening to somebody else or whatever. So, I got that what you were going for, picked up on it. The problem was, this is such high fantasy. I guess the more specifically, the genre is dark fantasy, and it's an anime that it was hard for me to make that crossover into this feels real. If that makes sense to you.
No, that's fair.
So it's I got it intellectually, emotionally, it didn't quite. I got it intellectually. I got it personally. I know why, as I said, why there was parallels here. But emotionally, it didn't quite hit the way I think you might have wanted it to for me. That being said, I remember laughing a lot during the first half of this. Because,
while there is certainly tragedy in the first half, the first, 4 to 5 episodes also does feature some slightly more lighthearted stuff in some respects, and some
Blade.
stuff.
It was kind of like cartoon demon Blade, in the sense that it's dark, it's gothic in a sense, but it's a superhero story. And what I was laughing about though was, I'm usually the one with the sex jokes on the show. I'm usually the ones, the one who makes the misogyny and the the dehumanizing type of jokes. I make a lot of jokes about hookers and strippers and things like that. That's just part of my routine. And you're always the straight man to my nuttiness. And the first couple of episodes where there's just tits everywhere on this thing, I'm I don't even know how you got through this. Let alone some of this must have been a real power watch for you, because the first half of it, I'm I had this thought of, and I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm having this thought as I'm watching this going, I know why I like this. Yeah, man, here's this superhero demon character just tearing ass and fucking babes. Yeah, this is a party show, man. You get past the first few minutes of them arguing over whether or not they should kill a cat, and then you're immediately into big boobs on a track, on a running track, and then he turns into a demon, and he's in the middle of a club where they might as well have been playing I Sit on Acid by Lords of Acid, and there's boobs everywhere, and I'm this is a lot of fun. What the hell is he talking about? Oh, the hard right, about episode 5. But that first half of it, I was really having a legit good time watching. I'm this is fun. I don't know, you gave me the impression that this was going to be ethereal and esoteric. That's not the case. At least that's not the case that I got from the first half of the watch. And even the second half, I never get ethereal and esoteric. I get an editorial on man's inhumanity to man, and I know this is hotly debated, and I guess we'll kick it around for a while. There was definitely tones of nihilism, and this is the sort of thing where I struggle with the concept of nihilism. Like, I understand that it's there, it exists. This is a personal thing for me. Given a choice, I prefer hope. I like things that are hopeful. I like optimism. And
well, if I might defend nihilism for a second,
sure.
Not all nihilism is bleak.
Okay.
There's
the vast majority of it is, though.
Well, again, if you look at people and their first experience kind of like confronting nihilism, they tend to do it well, not just nihilism, but nihilism being a subset of kind of the existential crises.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the first time people are exposed to this theory, they're first really kind of experimenting with different thoughts, with different schools of philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like me, that was my first encounter Nietzsche. My sophomore year of high school, I think.
It tends to be sort of an existential crisis of, the world is too big and too bad and nothing, and everything is meaningless. And then I think people turn a corner in their life and they find, they shrink the world for themselves and they find meaning in the little things: family, children, profession, whatever, art. However, wherever it is you find the meaning of life, there it is.
Yeah, and again, the problem is that a lot of people, when they are inclined to write stuff that is existential in that respect, it dips towards nihilism in the way that it is understanding the negative aspects of nihilism is the easy part,
mm-hmm.
right? That it's the very, very self-evident stuff if you kind of try to tackle aspects of that philosophy. If you want to take a slightly more hopeful spin on nihilism, I actually think the best way I ever heard it phrased was, if nothing we do matters, then the only thing that matters is what we do.
Okay, that makes sense. In either case, it's not that the second half was a struggle. I could validate the point of the narrative. I do believe that unchecked, it's the George Carlin thing, if I could reduce this to comedy bits, of man's innate nature is that the last guy on Earth will attack the mirror. I get that. And to the degree to which I think that is true, I think when you... And this is ultimately the story of Job, right? And, if you remove all of the things that create a life for somebody, and there's nothing left to sort of hold them against their inner nature, they will do horrific things. Like, I'm in agreement with the narrative. It's not pleasant to watch. So the first half I'm having fun with. The second half is kind of a slog. It's not badly done. Let me say that before this goes any further and you read me wrong. I don't think it's a badly done show. I don't know if it's for me, but it's not badly written. I don't think the performances are bad, and I think anime is anime. It is what it is. The animation. You either like it or you don't. So that said, I appreciated the point of view and agreed with it. And I was willing to watch it all the way through, and I wanted to see ultimately how it ended. And I think it's an actually brave ending. How many shows sort of embrace the darkest nature of the collective self the way this show does? Because, as we talk about a lot on Damn You Hollywood, there's always a studio. There was clearly no notes here, because no executive would be like,
no.
yeah.
Again, the director Masaki Yuasa. This is his vision from start to finish of this story.
Yeah, no, there's no way like this gets made, you know, with a large studio budget or anything, because there's no way they'd let that ending stand.
Well, and again, it's one of the things that I deeply appreciate about Go Nagai's original work. It's so difficult to fully contextualize what doing that to that property, especially the way manga and the manga business is structured, what the kind of balls that takes.
Okay, can you give me a 50 word or less on what you mean by that? Because I have no clue what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, happily. If you're a mangaka is the term for it. If you write, draw, manga, which is it's differentiated from comics in terms of discussion because we want to, for some reason, differentiate Western comics from Eastern comics.
Mm-hmm.
But the entire goal of, and I shouldn't say the entire goal, the big commercial goal, if you make manga, is to get it into Shonen Jump, where, again, they publish weekly, so if you actually get in, your work schedule becomes insane. I mean, the long-running stuff, the stuff like One Piece. One Piece has been like in continual week-to-week print, and now it's not the full thing. You have to do, I forget how many pages, but One Piece has been going on since. Oh god, when did One Piece start? So I know stuff like JoJo started in the 80s and is still ongoing. And I'm pretty sure Araki, throughout that entire period, has taken like one vacation. It is a profoundly grueling schedule to produce that kind of art on that schedule. Okay, yeah, sorry. One Piece started in 1997 and is still going.
Wow. And without a reboot? Without a wholesale reset of that particular universe? I can't even imagine such a thing in comics.
Yeah, they're still... oh, God. I mean, look, the fact that... you don't want to get me onto Oda, because Oda is a freak. He's the man's and I mean that in the best way possible. He's an absolute freak. He has mapped out his world to such a degree that if you ever want to have fun and get lost in a fictional world, just like look at the One Piece wiki and look at all the stuff that isn't like fan spun. Like fans will frequently there's this, there's an episode that takes place in this house, so we can, people will extrapolate based on the layout, what rooms where. No. He literally will have every island that you go to in that show has a theme. Houses of the main characters are laid out. Like it is an absurdly detailed world, and the man's been telling that same story professionally for, again, I said 97, so almost 30 years. It's again crazy, freak of nature. Point being, what most people in that business try to do is get into Shonen Jump, because that's where the biggest circulation is. That's where the most money can be made.
The Marvel of manga, you say?
The business model is different, but sure, in broad strokes, yes.
Okay.
Well, because Marvel at this point, it's one of the interesting things about how the manga business model works versus the, Westerns. Let's say Marvel, and I know there's other but let's say Marvel. Marvel doesn't get new characters, really. What they wind up doing is hiring new writers and artists to tell new stories, but with the same characters, right? So Wolverine is still there, Cyclops is still there, Captain America is still there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There hasn't been a substantive new character addition to the Marvel Pantheon in how many years now?
Quite a few.
By contrast, something like Shonen Jump is all about the characters. And if you're the writer, author, et cetera, of that property, when they cut that property, you go with it. So
okay.
They get they get an entire new IP that they just try to turn these, and they will then milk it dry, until the author's done, the story's done, the circulation drops, whatever you, cut them, and bring in someone else with a completely new story. Well, completely new being, you know what I mean.
Yep.
So they turn over IPs a lot faster, whereas Marvel burns through writers. So again, the big goal is to get into that publication stream, and then draw out your series for as long as you possibly can to make as much money as you can. So stuff like, again, Bleach or Naruto goes on for as long as they can possibly justify it going on, because people are still interested. There's the book itself is still selling. If it's really popular, you get an anime adaptation. The merchandise is still prevalent. There's elements of the business model that are similar to that extent. But in 1970, in the 70s, create Devilman was a very popular character. It got the anime adaptation, which was not of the same material but the same characters, was done basically concurrently with the manga. So you've got, if you're going a guy who'd worked with Shonen Jump at various times, he had different properties picked up by them, to basically have created a very popular character in Devilman, who was very popular, still is, to then just kind of voluntarily, of your own free will, go, you know what? No. I think we're going to go in a different direction here. For the sake of artistic freedom and to tell the story that he wanted to tell and whatnot. I mean, look, an artist, whatever their medium, after they've achieved commercial success, just throwing elements of it away to stand by their art is still, in 2020, not something you see all the time. To do it back then, when the entire business model of the profession you've chosen is fundamentally based around familiar characters stretching everything out as long as possible. I mean, I'm trying to think of what would be an appropriate. Imagine like if they'd actually killed Superman when they did the Death of Superman arc with Doomsday,
and just left him dead.
Yeah, just straight up dead.
Yeah, it would have been brave, and some might say professional suicide.
I'm not going to argue the second half of that because I think you're correct. But that is kind of the point, that the fact that he was able to do that and continue to rebound so successfully. I mean, the man's still working. Go Nagai is. He's been making manga for like 50 years now, and again, still currently active. Last I checked. So, point being that it's rare when you get into the machine of any artistic endeavor to see people actually take risks with it, and especially to see them pay off the way his did.
Okay. So we've been at this about an hour, and we've covered it kind of in broad strokes. I told you when we were show prepping, I was like, I kind of wanted to let you guide me through the minutia, the thematic minutia of the show, because I think that's where the most meat is.
Okay. Again, there's a lot of ways to kind of unpack this show. And I say that. Well, again, let's limit it to this show in particular rather than referencing some of the other materials.
Yes.
Again, the fact that it's anti-war is very obvious. I disagree with the premise that I can't remember if this was Nagai or Yuasa who put it forth. Forgive me, I know it's one of them. That there's never a justification for war. Again, I don't personally agree with that. But
I was going to say, if that's if that's what you're supposed to get as a takeaway from this, I mean, sure, I guess if I thought about it long enough and watched it again, I could pull that out of there. But I would agree with you that there's always a justification for war. Starvation being one of them.
Yeah, it's just that it should be the absolute last thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think war as a concept is a utility. I mentioned starvation. War is always. I know this is somebody else's line, and I've heard you say it, and I can't 100% remember how it goes, so I'm going to mangle it a bit. But it's like war is the act of like taking resources. War is the act of achieving resources through another means, something along those lines.
Okay.
You're letting me flounder.
I can't recall the quote you're mangling, but okay. No, I get your point, and I can absolutely believe that, because that sound. I don't want to. There's a like one of the original like historians in the old Greek world had a philosophy on the 3 causes of war, and that sounds very much like something I might have mentioned.
Mm-hmm. But that's it. If you set up if a civilization has an infinite amount of resources, it has no reason to venture outside of itself. You trade and you expand because your population expands, and you have to have the resources to support your population, or you collapse. Jared Diamond wrote a whole book about it. It's called Collapse. And so war is an extension of that. At some point you run up into other people, and either you join them or you fight them. That's that.
Yeah. And so again, that as a philosophical point, the fact that there's never a justification for war, I don't agree with.
Right.
But that said, I can still appreciate anti-war sentiment and material, because war is a terrible thing that should only ever be undertaken in the direst of circumstances. My opinion. People have mentioned about when it comes to detailing this story. There's a lot of this that is just straight up that is just analogous to going through puberty.
Mm-hmm.
There's that bit in the second and third episodes where where Akira doesn't even refer to his body as his body. It's dispossessed. It's this body.
It's very Spider-Man-esque, in the sense that he starts out as Nebbish, and then after becoming Devilman, Peter Parker's body physically changed. He didn't just have the superpowers. And every physical and every real life iteration of this, there's always a scene of either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland mugging in the mirror, and suddenly they have 6-pack abs.
Yeah. So just going through the changes that one goes through during puberty.
Mm-hmm.
How many people you will go through this with your children? But I imagine that
don't do it now.
At some point that when your mother said to you, my mother's fond of saying this, like she could actually kind of remember the day that she feels I was taken down and replaced with an alien.
Yeah.
Your temper becomes shorter. Your body is uncoordinated as it continues to grow. You start having sexual maturity, which is another thing in this show. So there's a lot of Akira's physical changes and the way he has to kind of come to terms with who he is in the new world now that he's not both physically and internally who he used to be.
Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing you normally seen tackled in like a sitcom format, or
sure. After we spend 20 minutes with the parents arguing about who's going to have the talk with their kid.
Yeah, or it's like Alexis and I did. I'm not okay with this, and there was that was a bit of a coming of age thing, especially the book. This is a girl dealing with low body self-image, which is very common among women and probably some men, but not probably, definitely some men, where you just kind of look at yourself and go, well, this is not what I thought I'd look like. And so it just, in a show that, Devilman Crybaby is very multi-layered. And so it's fun. That's the thing. It's like there's beats and there's parts of the show that are not solely focused on the end game, which is to get us to the apocalypse. It takes time out to say, hey, it sucks being a teenager. Here's how. Which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, this show has, this is one of the things that I think was pointed out by somebody else, so I apologize for not crediting you properly. this show definitely has a very a genuine affection for young people, and is very both sympathetic and empathetic to some of the trials that they go through. Be that coming to terms with your own sexual identity. You have a couple of gay characters who that's part of what's that's part of what they struggle with is the demonic possession becomes both literal within the sense of the story, but also slightly metaphorical for them not being able to fully make peace with the world and figuring out who they are. You have, I think, who else? You have the young rap group, which basically serves as the Greek chorus.
Yes,
for giant parts of the.
They also start off as bullies, and I thought they were just going to be kind of comic foils, and I figured eventually they'd get theirs from Devilman, and then they actually become. They kind of turn a corner and become somewhat heroes in the story for as long as they're alive.
Yeah, a couple of them become heroes. A couple of them at the end are villainous.
Yeah.
So there is a deep affection there for the plight of the young people, and as they start to realize the wider world that they occupy and have to look around at. There's what was it? Crap, I completely lost my talking point there, so let me move on. I'm gonna get hung up on that now because I can't remember it. Oh well, it'll come to me later.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
As sexually explicit as the first half of the show is, did you struggle with it?
No, because I am. I am not the best example of my faith.
Okay. You don't have to go into anything that's going to make you uncomfortable, and I'm not needling you.
No. It's a very fair question, and I'm trying to find the right way to articulate my point. It's not so much uncomfortable as so much as what's the best way to say this? I've seen a lot of crap. Some of it I regret seeing. To be very, very clear. But I also, while I do think that there's not to get too preachy about my personal religion, there's a bit that we are admonished to seek out things that are good, virtuous, lovely, praiseworthy, of good report. And if I wanted to get semantic, I could argue that stuff that is of good report or praiseworthy can include a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily include the first qualifiers. But I'm not here to get semantically bogged down. Again, I'm willing to take chances on stuff that I watch. Sometimes I regret it. Sometimes I stop partway through.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm also very hesitant to completely lock myself off from experiences that challenge and are different from the purely saccharine or good.
Mm-hmm. Because go ahead, finish your point.
So I have to make that choice, and to be clear, I know a bunch of people of my faith who have very hard lines about, no, I don't watch anything that includes X, Y, Z, whatever. And look, I'm not here to judge anybody about it. Mm-hmm. Long as you return the favor, we're cool.
So the use of sex in this, I thought was interesting, since we're on that subject.
Well, again, if you want to look at this as part of an allegory for puberty, yeah, it comes up. Pardon the poor choice of words.
Well, not even. I don't mean sex in like the sensual or lovemaking sense. I mean sex in the raw pornographic sense. Yeah,
this is very much. Well, if we're talking about demons in this, both in the story being literal, creatures of pure instinct and desire.
Yeah.
The drive to reproduce is the second strongest impulse that any living thing experiences.
I'm guessing next
You
to
ha-
eating.
It's next to survival, however you want to qualify that.
Okay.
The urge to survive will trump the urge to have sex. Pretty much everything else falls secondary. Anything other than your base survival will, in terms of the base biological urge, fall behind the urge to have sex.
Right. And a lot of our structural relationship to sex, the civilizing of sex as it is, comes from really the civilization of man, isn't it? You just can't go out there and spread your progeny as far and wide as your ability, gives rise to. Civilization stops you from doing that. At a higher level, we have laws. At an inner, deeper level, we have morals. These are all man-made, by the way.
I would argue the moral part of that, but that's a much deeper theological discussion.
Well, what I'm saying is, just the topic of marriage, for example, as a way of civilizing men, as a way of compartmentalizing their energies into usefulness to keep civilization running. And when I say civilization, I mean continue to produce children, make sure the civilization isn't falling into the fire. In any case, what you see in the show, in the early parts of it, is what happens when you remove morality? What happens when you remove civilization? What happens when you remove all those structural girders? And it's just instinct, and the instinct is the bang. Whatever, wherever, however you find it. And the show plays around with that a lot in the beginning. Less so towards the end. The end was very primarily concerned with wrapping up this idea of, and I don't know, sex and violence are always linked together. They're linked together in song, they're linked together in theme. And
they're linked together, not to get too far apart on this, they're actually linked together in your brain.
So I think
the biochemistry connecting, especially in mammals, connecting aggression with sex, those two drives are very, very closely linked. In fact, it is in no small part the separation of those two is what allowed humanity to go the way it did. If they're linked all that much closer, then we become chimps rather than humans.
So my point is, I think the show very purposefully, if Netflix had split this in half, there would be the sex half and the violence half. So the first half of the series is very concerned with sex and its relationship to humanity. And so just as an example, probably the rawest, most sexual scene in the whole show is the initial club scene, which, is just raw, pornographic, orgy sex. It immediately turns to violence and it's supposed to be very Old Testament-y, Sodom and Gomorrah. This, look,
the more indulgent you are,
more this is supposed to bring down the wrath of God. And so it's, quite literally it gives how are we pronouncing his name? Ryu. It gives Ryu the opportunity to then start stabbing all these people, and narratively the excuse is, well, they're shit people to begin with. Look at what they're doing. They're indulging in lust.
They're indulging in everything.
Yeah.
It's
good to stab them.
Well, no. I mean, again, it is the devil stabbing them.
Well, no, I get that. But I'm saying I feel like. Give me half a second.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of indulgent, my drug alarm just went off. That's my old man alarm to take pills.
Well, so point being, as far as that goes, as far as the point you're making, again, they're indulging in sex. They're indulging in various drugs, alcohol. Every vice that you have is somehow being indulged, some of them at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So, but
Ryu's, I actually liked Ryu's looking around at this and going, this is too tame. We need some blood in the air. That'll attract the demons.
Yeah, that is a fun line. I think where I was going with this was, I don't think they want to lose you as an audience member early on in this. So if everyone's like... So if you change that scene around, and it's like, a saccharine or holy affair, and he goes nuts and starts stabbing people...
Look, if he massacres the midnight mass...
Yeah.
At the local Catholic church, yeah. Very... the entire tenor of a lot of that is changed.
Because from a character perspective, you need to stay with him until he makes the turn. And you're not going to be with him. Like, I think you as an audience member can almost justify, like, oh, he's purging the sinners. Got it.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because a lot of what Ryu does is kind of slowly lead Akira down this, the path of damnation, as the devil is wont to do. And it's interesting the way that we as the audience are kind of brought along with him in that respect.
Right. So you can't buy right off the back that Ryu is a wholly bad guy, because which is so interesting considering his actual, like, on-screen essential his introduction to the audience is him pulling up in a very expensive car, whipping out a machine gun and threatening a bunch of teenagers. But everything and that's my point though, everything he does seems cool and anti-hero and vigilante-ish, and like there's nothing you can look at him and like singularly justifiably go, I don't like you, you're a bad guy. He's existing in this sort of gray area, but he has to, because he has to make that change so that when the audience goes, oh, you're the villain in this thing, oh shit. And I think it also makes the stuff he does partway through the second half, where he's turning humanity on itself and and firing up the engines of war, it makes the final reveal more effective. It's like, oh, you're not working for humanity, you're the devil. Got it. It is a very interesting thing to see how many people along the way, kind of took his side, right?
Who, as we start out, not altruistic, but appearing altruistic, like, hey, I discovered this big threat to humanity, but it sounds crazy. I need proof before I can go about talking about it. Otherwise, I'm going to become a laughing stock, and no one will listen to me when it actually matters.
Right.
Okay, makes sense. Well, so then, here we have a bunch of drunken, horny, drug-addled degenerates, and we really do need these things to show up for our evidence. So I'm not going to kill anybody, but, maim, stab, little blood in the air. Little blood in the water brings out the sharks, right? And just every step along the way, up until you get to, and wherever this point is with him as a character that you go, okay, you've gone too far, you've crossed the line. It's interesting to kind of think about how far you go with him in that, kind of descent into madness.
Yeah, it works on a few levels, because isn't that Satan's way? It's sort of a justifiable series of unfortunate events until you realize you've become an unrepentant sinner. And like, I don't even know how I got here. Well, that's the devil's trick.
There's a lot of scripture about that. He binds you with a flaxen cord. That's how he starts leading you, and then it just becomes more tighter and tighter. The devil seeks to pacify and lull you, and thus speedily lead you down to hell. So it is a really, really well thought out, well written variation on that character that they presented.
I don't know how well an Americanized version of this does. Like,
in what sense?
the same concept, because he's a great character. I wish
devil?
he didn't. Yeah. No, their conceptualization of Satan in this show as Rue, I think, is very well done and very well crafted.
Yeah, someone who is completely amnesiac about his identity, but whose personality and whose nature constantly kind of bubbles up. I mean, there's so much great foreshadowing in this. Some of it's very, very obvious. Some of it's not.
When I say Americanization, I just wish he didn't sound so anime. And I say that with all the characters, like, I'm always recasting. I'm always, thinking about live action in my head. And I'm like, I wonder how this does if you do it live action with American actors and American accents.
Well, I don't...
But the characterizations are still there and still solid.
I don't think... there is believe it or not, there is a live action Devilman movie. Mm-hmm. It is universally panned and hated.
I could see Matt Ryan as Satan, and that's maybe because it's not that far cry of his Constantine character.
Okay, yeah. I mean, again, I'm not sure. I don't know what a well done live action version of this story looks like. There's a lot of it that I think is very, and to be clear, this is not to say that it's superior, but anytime you find a story that is very much, this works in this medium and maybe won over, anime is different from manga, but they are very, very adjacent. They're next to each other. But, could you go even, one step in the other direction for manga? Could you make this just a novel? I don't know. I mean, you certainly can, but does it work the same way?
Right.
How important are the visuals as seen by the creators as opposed to simply having them seen in your head? And to be fair, the reverse works. There's plenty of stuff that works great on the page when your imagination is in play, but okay, how am I going to translate this onto the screen? And the answer is badly most of the time.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the struggle comic books have had in general. I just threw that out there as a thought exercise because
it is. It's a really interesting one, and because you have to go young. Every character is young. Mm-hmm. You need some very what do I say here? You need people who can believably portray the appropriate range, right? Because Satan in this is mostly just crazy. And when I say crazy, I don't mean raving lunatic in a straitjacket, but he is crazy. Again, his response to a bunch of a teenage rap gang
is to pull a machine gun.
Is to pull a machine gun. That's not a normal response.
In the devil's defense, he did shoot at the ground.
He didn't kill anybody at that particular point, sure, but again, if we're categorizing. What does it say about someone if their first response to seeing another person is to pull out a gun and go, you know what, why don't you just hang over there?
He assessed the situation quickly. I think my only point with this entire half a bit that we're doing here is to say I think he's the best written character in the show.
Well, if I
just wish I wish the dialogue were performed slightly less. I'm going to go with the word pitchy. Unless you love anime, then it's fine. But to me, it's pitchy.
It is very much within the genre.
It absolutely is. But I think that's where I'm struggling.
I'm agreeing with you. I mean, the same is true of what's another example of dialogue and delivery that is essentially unique to its genre, because it's true of a lot of stuff, soap operas, right? Soap opera dialogue and soap opera delivery is its own thing.
Yeah, it's very
it only works there.
Very breathy. It's very melodramatic.
I mean, the average action movie dialogue is so bad.
I'm thinking of the CW shows. There's a very deliberate style of dialogue delivery in the CW nighttime telly dramas, a lot of the DC stuff that you can't get away with in other elements of television.
Yeah, or if you wanted to go the other sense, this is actually, I think, a fair criticism that's been leveled at the works of Aaron Sorkin.
Everyone speaking in rapid fire in his sharpest wit on the planet?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Like, again, it's on, again, you can tell it's on brand, and you can make it work in the appropriate setting, but the shelf life on that and the half-life on it is very limited. Like, that doesn't translate very well.
Yeah, I like the newsroom, but I know why the dialogue style in that show drove people to want to commit murder. Like, I get it.
Yeah. So, which is all to say, I understand your point. I do. And to kind of dovetail on that, there's an interesting kind of thought about this entire show. Ryu's the only one that's actually has an arc.
Yeah.
Everyone else, it's not that they're uninteresting or they're badly written.
Well, they're reacting.
Yeah, there's a lot of reaction. There's a lot of, how does Akira as a character change from the beginning to the end of the show? The answer is, if we're talking about his character, not really.
Yeah, go ahead.
He gains attributes. He gains power. He gains this ability to fight. But one of the, and I mean this in the positive way, one of the beautiful things about his character is that at the end, he's essentially the same internally when he's the little kid crying over a dead kitten in the beginning, as he is as Devilman in all his glory, charging to do combat with Satan. That's actually one of the strongest points of the character, is that he never loses the internal humanity that he has. He augments it appropriately, to my way of thinking, in some respects, but he doesn't go through this. He doesn't have this great big character arc.
But isn't that a parallel to then again Job, which I've referenced a few times now? Job at the beginning of the Bible tale has wealth and family and happiness and devotion, and at the end of it, all those physical things are changed. His health has deteriorated, his livestock is gone, everything's gone, but he still has devotion. Job is the same humble servant he was at the beginning of that story as he is at the end. That's the parable. That's the point.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Akira is in this, in that, if the tale they're telling is that, I mean, Rue, I keep calling him Rue, fucking Street Fighter. One more time with the name. Rio. His name was Rio.
I occasionally will. You've probably heard this. I've occasionally dipped into Ryu instead of Rio, but
okay.
My apologies for slurring that a little bit.
I'm going to go with Rio because now I've got the Duran Duran song in my head.
Go for it.
Perfect. So Rio rhymes with Dio. His name was Rio, and anyway.
That's a little bit. Keep it moving.
Rio, his whole point is that with a few tweaks of the nipple here and there, man will devour itself. That man is inherently bad. And Akira's kind of argument throughout this whole thing is, no, there's, like every hero in these kind of tales, there is good there, and it's worth preserving. And I think, I think the audience is supposed to derive from this, will Akira fall, because Rio wants Akira to change. When God and Satan are arguing about Job, and Satan's like, he'll fuck you the minute you start messing with his life, and God's like, nope, it'll be fine. I think here, the narrative, the thematic narrative is supposed to be, will Rio successfully corrupt Akira the way he wants to. His ultimate goal was as you said before, have Akira join him in the aftermath of the war on God. And
well, to the extent that Rio as a character is capable of love,
mm-hmm.
that's actually one of the things he struggles with for a while is, he cares for Akira, but if you want to draw a parallel to, and given their presentation, this show has I don't know how traditionally Christian this is, because again, my religious beliefs are Christian, the fact that most of the Christian world tends to consider members of my faith not Christian because you're a bunch of jackasses.
Yeah, I almost said, like, wait, aren't you Mormon? Okay, I guess they're
for
offshoots of one another.
It is the name of my church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Got it.
It's in the freaking title.
I understand. Yep, got it.
Sorry, that's...
Look, I'm Jewish. I don't pay attention to any of this
No,
stuff.
you're cool. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm just... There's a certain series of jokes about my religion that I find a little bit tiring, but I kind of try to take with good humor, even if I think they're stupid. There's some that have really started to, I now very deliberately choose to be annoyed by. And the whole Mormons aren't Christian thing that annoys me.
Okay.
I let that one because it is so profoundly just wrong. You couldn't be more wrong.
Got it.
So again, I understand you're not trying to piss me off. So I get it. We're cool. But so the traditional, in a lot of the Christian tradition, angels are hermaphroditic.
Yeah, I got that when you saw his shape and he has the big reveal at the end.
Yeah, and the point being that one of the things he tries to appeal to Akira with is, okay, you're not gay, fair, I can look like a woman, and we're good there, and which of course completely ignores the point that Akira loved Miki not because she was a woman, but because of who she was as a person, and you're about as far from that as you can get. So no.
Well, to wrap up the point that I was sort of wrestling with there. He wants to corrupt Akira, feels Akira is corruptible, and in a sense goes through the same rigmarole that Satan and God go through in the book of Job. Strip everything away. And in this case, Earth. Akira will fall in line, having nowhere else to go, and Akira, being a hero of this tale, remains pure and, dies without being corrupted. Which is a nice tale. Tragic, but nice. I don't know if there's anything more, but you're right. Ultimately, that's the ultimate non-change. And I think it's okay to have that. I think if you're telling a story of temptation and corruption, and your main character stays stalwart and true, I think that's strong. That's strong characterization. You don't necessarily have to have an arc.
Yeah, and in the right story, you kind of go, okay, wait, why does this character not change over the course of Captain Marvel, for example? Why is there no change? Why is this character just flat as a board? Because the story they're trying to tell there is one that should, logically, feature some character change and growth along the way. Here, the fact that the character does not change actually does signify growth, I think, I would argue.
Sure.
And which is kind of similar to the argument of, does a character growth versus character development? Yeah. Some characters don't grow or change, but we learn a heck of a lot about them throughout the course of a series.
So, I don't love the Miki Maku character.
Of course you don't like Miki. Well, I say that somewhat facetiously. Miki is just the best in a way that can kind of get grating.
Well, that's the thing. Here's the thing, and I feel like there's a reason I brought this up, and because I feel like consistency should be addressed here in our own podcast. When Pat and I have talked about this, you and I have talked about this, we're not into the speechifying girl as a means of resolution. So, on the one hand, I can appreciate her pureness and goodness, and I think that's lovely. On the other hand, other than being a damsel in distress at various points, her big contribution to the narrative is a handful of speeches she gives. And while the speeches don't save the day, so it's not as bad as some of the other stuff we've talked about.
In fact, her last one done via the internet and kind of damns them.
Yeah. I still don't love that in a visual medium with action, the best you could give this character was a handful of rah-rah speeches that in all reality, this never works like in real life, you know? And people are going to hear that, like, it's a fucking cartoon, get over it. Like, okay, I get it, but there are elements of this that are like, yeah, this has parallels to the real world. But there's no, like, girl standing out in a crowd of an angry mob yelling, why can't we all get along? And everyone goes, fuck, she's right.
I think, in fairness, well, I think you are correct. I think that is a valid criticism. I think there's a few things with this character in particular that wind up working well within the context of the narrative. One being that her big speeches don't actually come to big live audiences. The closest you get is when she sees a couple of cops with guns on our rap group after they've been falsely identified.
Oh, that drove me up the fucking wall.
I can see why. And I don't get me wrong, the first time I watched it, I also kind of went, yeah, if she steps between the cops and them,
yeah,
that does not go well.
Nope.
At the same time, you know, she's also stepping, like, I like the fact that they had a good character, and part of the reason that I think she winds up being a little bit as undeveloped as she is, and I say, again, not just growth, but developed, a lot of what we get from her in terms of how we perceive her is from Akira's perspective. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the bent for the whole show, and
he holds her up on a pedestal, as guys will want to do with the girls they enjoy, like, want.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that kind of plays into how she's presented. It's deliberately done to reflect how Akira thinks about her. But no, I did. On the one hand, this annoys me because these types of people annoy me. But is it not just unbelievably true to life that, you know, the nice girl right before she tries to go into hiding as the world collapses, decides she has to have another Facebook post about it, and about how much, you know, if we all kind of band together, we can become, you know, again, this came out 2 years ago in 2018, and the state of online discourse was, I would say, marginally better than it currently is, but it's still not great.
Yeah, marginally by the thinnest of margins, but yes.
It was technically better, the best kind of better. So a lot of the responses, and this show doesn't play around too much with the internet and the online world. It does just enough to enhance the story it's telling. So, you know, you have Ryo's Twitter account. You have the internet's reaction to some of the stuff that he said, how it starts spreading. His broadcast of the track and field meet where the one guy goes berserk is done online rather than via terrestrial broadcast. So they do enough to play around with it to enhance the story, and just the way it's everyone involved in that got it exactly right. If we're talking about, like, okay, I'm going to post this, I'm a person with some degree of notoriety, here's a post calling for unity and helpfulness, and then the first 20 comments are all either lewd sexual requests or angry rejections of the philosophy.
Yep.
And then somebody says something and then is immediately somebody says something or is inspired by it, posts about it, and then is immediately dogpiled on as well. Like, they hit that nail square on the head.
Yeah, that's every reason I quit writing for 411, by the way. Other than ran out of time and interest. But, like, that's like the 411, you know, you spend...
It's not as bad as it used to be, but yeah, I was there when you were, so yeah, I know how bad it was.
Yeah, you know, you spend hours crafting what you think is a well-informed, well-intentioned, intelligent article on manufacturing and jobs, and the first comment is about 2 guys, 1 hammer, or some shit that some guy wrote, and I was like, why do I fucking do this? So, I get it.
Yeah. I think there's the last couple of things that I just kind of want to mention about this show. And again, I know there's a few characters that we haven't really touched on. The Miko character is... Yeah, I knew you were going to do that. That's why I gave you the pause.
You know me so well.
I do. Her struggles with self-worth, her worth relative to her peers, her worth in her own eyes. There's stuff there to talk about with her. I don't know how much we want to get into that. There's a really... I think there's 2 other things I want to talk about very somewhat quickly, depending on where the conversation goes. One deals with Akira again, and it's one that I think a lot of people either miss, or maybe I'm the one who's getting this wrong, who's like searching for a validation of my worldview, and if so, fair enough. I'm still going to try and support my claim with evidence. Akira is a really nice reminder that empathy is not... Well, it is powerful and potentially the best of us, it's not always a good thing. In the beginning, he's a character essentially crippled by his empathy.
Yeah.
He can't be around sad stuff without breaking down. He's empathetic to a fault. It's... the ability to empathize with your fellow man is certainly an admirable thing and one that we all should want, but he's a giant nothing burger until he is able to temper that with a little bit of logic and a little bit of ability to interact with the world courtesy of his possession. His empathy does not really become a helpful, useful tool in how he is as a person until it's married with the ability to affect the world around him. At which point, the fact that he can empathize becomes, again, one of the most important features that you can have. So I do kind of look at his character in this as a reminder that empathy, very, very good, very, very necessary, but too much, very, very bad. Almost as too much empathy is as bad as too little empathy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know. Mm-hmm. Consider who I'm talking to.
Yep.
But when you finally find a way to interact with the world, be that however it is, when you finally gain some teeth, the ability to meaningfully interact with stuff, if you don't have the empathy, that's when things go really bad. And again, by the same token, if all you have is empathy, but you're a giant pushover, you're not helping anything either.
There was a story a girl at work told today, and I believe she is bi, and she wears like a rainbow bracelet around work, and she goes into a housing unit, and she says hello to the deputy and proceeds to do her work. And the deputy goes into a rant about how he drove through a set of protesters today, and thank God he was. You're using the word empathy, but I'm kind of latching on to the concept of being tone deaf for purposes of the story.
Yeah.
But they kind of travel in the same circles. So the deputy says, "I drove through the set of protesters today, and boy golly gee, thank God, I was wearing workout clothes and my uniform was tucked away because those people are really mad at the cops and I could have been hurt and that's terrorism." And it was, and he didn't say it, but it was as if to say, white heterosexual males are the most put upon people on this planet, facing the slings and arrows of hatred far and wide, and nobody knows our plight. To the gay girl who's just staring at him going, if you were any more tone deaf, do you hear how you sound?
I mean, on the one hand, I can appreciate him saying, you know what, probably a good thing I wasn't wearing my uniform when I had to drive through those protesters, because on a purely practical level, yeah, that could have got bad in a hurry.
Sure.
On the other, if that's not the sum total of your point, and you're not just delivering it in a flat, essentially flatly, and not like putting on airs.
He was totally like, feel sympathy for me because I am a poor put upon deputy whose life may have been in danger, and what a terrible thing for that to be to the gay girl. You know?
Yeah, you are correct there. And again, to get to the empathy point, the reason I think and there might be some people screaming at me, but hear me out for a second. The reason too much empathy is a bad thing is because you wind up flip-flopping, right? You're around the guy who's like, I'm a deputy, I'm a good guy, I'm trying to do my job, I had to drive through these protesters in a circumstance where these protests or bad actors within them have turned violent in a hurry. And your empathetic response is, "Oh, you poor man, that was terrible for you." Then you walk by the protesters, and they're talking about all the terrible things that are going on, and how law enforcement agencies have not done a good job about weeding out issues of corruption within their own ranks, and et cetera, et cetera. And you go, okay, no, you wind up just pulled in every possible direction, and you wind up paralyzed with inactivity because, apart from the worst of the worst, you empathize with everyone and you get it and you don't know what to do.
Yeah, and I think that's where I tend to struggle because, and I was talking to my coworkers about this today. The tendency for me is to empathize with every side of all but the strictest, most like
look if
clear arguments.
If your argument is that, pedophilia should be legal and I like dogfighting, okay, I have no time for you.
Yeah, there's very little empathy for the counter, for the argument there. But in most arguments, and this is why, like, politically I struggle with a lot of people because, they almost have like a religious view of these things. And when you see it, when you understand both sides, and you empathize with both sides, and you see where both sides are coming from, and now you're sort of reduced to kind of picking and choosing what of those things work best together to solve problems, it gets overwhelming, especially when everyone around you is like, pick a side, fuckface.
Yeah.
So that's
you and I have had that experience. You and I have that shared experience between us.
Yeah. It's why I don't like doing it with a lot of people anymore. I just don't like talking about it because I don't want to pick Mets or Yankees. I just like baseball. But
can you really like baseball if you don't like either the Mets or the Yankees and hate the other? No, I promise. I'm not trying to. That's just to needle you. I'm not trying to ask you to go down the philosophical rabbit hole.
Nope. Moving on. So the idea.
Don't rivalries really make the experience of being a fan? No, they don't. You morons.
So the crushing empathy, the inability to, like, you're absolutely right. If you don't temper that with a degree of pragmatism, logic, you just wander in a tight circle. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do next. I don't necessarily find that with Akira for the large part of the show.
Well, that's because in the very first episode that no longer becomes a part of his character.
Yeah. I will say this. Before the great Satan reveal, when he's telling him, when he's sort of mansplaining his, the reason why humanity had to die, and Akira's just like, you fucking asshole. You're a human too. And he's like, well, I'm not. It's the well, I'm not, or the oh, I know elements of the dialogue and storytelling in this that make me have a negative feeling towards this show, where I have one. And that's part of the reason why I brought up Mickey Maki. Because she does that with linking all the way back to talking about Miko. Because Miko has these, like... What I liked about the Miko character was, within her, you're just kind of dealing with a C and D plot of self-worthiness of a girl, body self-image, things of that nature. She tells a very nice story with her character. And she gets to the point where she reveals that she loves Miki, and that she has all these body issues, and she's just bearing her soul, and this asshole goes, I know. Like, I can't think of two words that are, and this is just from a therapist point of view, but if you're really trying to help somebody, don't fucking say I know. Makes you sound like an asshole. And it doesn't make the other person feel like they're being heard. It makes them seem like an idiot for having shared anything with you. And it made me hate that character.
I'm pretty sure that's a translation issue.
Mm-hmm.
What it gets translated, because what she's saying in Japanese fits that particular amount of camera time and that amount of syllables, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the sentiment conveyed I believe the sentiment conveyed in the original language is not. I know is not necessarily the same. Doesn't convey the same thing.
Okay, well, to anyone working in Japanese to English translation, strike
Maybe I'm
I
wrong.
know from the fucking from your dialogue. Just take it out of there. There's another. Oh, yeah, and then with Rio and Akira, he's like, "You're a human too." Well, I'm not. The reveal is nice, and it's jarring if you don't see it coming. The dialogue with it is kind of like, haha, it's a little smarmy, it's a little smarty pants, but I'm not a human. Huzzah, wings. Like, can't you have done that silently? Show, don't tell.
I kind of liked that he said it, and this
Okay.
might be this might purely be an artistic choice that I preferred versus what you prefer. I did kind of like him finally seeing Akira again after his own internal realization about who he is, and one of the first things Akira says to him is, "How dare you? How could you do this to humans? You're one of us." And he's like, I mean, you can't. I almost feel like that character would never just show. He would say something. So just kind of actually, I'm not. Sorry. All the clues were there, dumbass. You could have picked up on it.
To my mind, and this might be a deeply personal thing, it has an air of, but I have an invisible shield that negates your ray gun. It's like,
Okay. I can see where you get that.
I
think the only other thing I wanted to touch on briefly in this, I mean, again, there's no getting around the state of the world right now. We haven't talked about it a whole lot because, for a variety of reasons.
Nobody listening to us who tuned into podcasts about Devilman Crybaby really wants to hear what we think about Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. So, and I also tend to feel that content that dwells on that stuff too much has a very limited shelf life.
Yeah.
We don't want to be making Murphy Brown here, you know? But the last thing I think worth touching on very briefly as far as this goes is one of the things that this show touches on, not so much touches on as a talking point, but it's just already so ingrained into society that it is able to use it, and that's how easily people are manipulated by the media they choose to consume.
Oh, sure. Okay, so we just said we don't want to talk about this, but I kind of, because you brought that up, I kind of have to.
Well, again, there's a degree that because I want to talk about this and what's going on in the world. That's why I preface it. Like, okay, we're going to now talk about something within the show that has enough real-world parallels right now that I think it's appropriate to at least loosely discuss them.
Something that Melissa and I were talking about today, for those of, maybe if you're just tuning in for the first time, Melissa's my wife, and yeah, I'm married, people. Believe that.
Twice.
Twice, yes.
Sorry.
It's fine. You see it all the time in like your Facebook feeds. There's like every third post is one of your friends or like ancillary associates that's just like, don't be sheep, don't let the media, like it's some sort of conjectured argument, and then don't be sheep, don't let the media fool you. And it's like, calm the fuck down, first of all. So second of all, like, the shift in the last 20 years of the media is lying to you, the media is your enemy. I mean, there's a nuanced discussion to be had about coverage and access and what ill-begotten gains come from that. There's a discussion to be had about biases in the editorial room, biases in cable media, what in all cable media has wrought. Your Facebook feed is not the place to have that argument, nor is Twitter. But there has been this marked pitch in just the last 20 years of that parallels the growth of the internet, that really goes to this idea of everything in the news is a giant fucking lie to control people. And it's like, what fucking paranoia has come over us since 2000? It's crazy, but that's what the show talks about.
And, I mean, consider for just a second, within the context of the show, you have one character with a degree of... Because Rio is actually a professor. So you have one character with a degree of intellectual authority, right? He's there... And in one press conference, he's able to whip up a giant amount of frenzy. And I mean this in the best... I mean this in all sincerity. That would absolutely happen. if somebody...
Well, it has happened.
Yeah, I mean,
a guy ran for president on that premise.
That is true.
And won.
That's absolutely true.
And again, just to be clear, so we're not mincing words, the man fucking won on whipping up intrinsic hatred and passive racial thoughts and frustration at the direction of the economy and the social culture, and was like, what if I bottled that up and just poured it and then set it on fire? And people were like, we'll file the fire, it's fine, lead.
Yep. So it's incredibly true to life, despite this being a dark fantasy superhero show.
There are sometimes I was watching this and I'm wondering if Trump gets elected and somebody turns around and goes, you know what this feels like to me? Devilman Crybaby. Let's develop that. This was I can't imagine it really was, but this almost feels like a response.
There's no way.
There's
a singular representation of President Trump because there's one scene where you see him in the Oval Office, but there's no way this was a direct response to his election. There's too many moving parts to make something like this. But
I know, but do you see where I say it feels like that? Because somebody reacts to Trump's election and goes, I need to tell an allegory of whipping up of racial tensions and war and frustration, and what mechanism through which I tell this story? How about a fucking 50-year-old manga?
Here's this very popular property that's been adapted multiple times. There's something again, there's, if you count the original Devilman and all of the offshoots that take place, there's something 16 to 18, I think, variations of this story or sequels or what have you that have taken place. So it's popular. It's sure, this would this I agree with you. It's an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to believe because, and to then also, I mean, Trump did it with a lot of just straight rhetoric more than anything else.
Sure.
If you're able to kind of marry that same type of presentation with, here's empirical evidence to support everything I'm saying. Now, don't get me wrong. We know that it's being twisted, but when Rio gets up there and says, "Yeah, there's demons among us, people," he ain't lying. He lies about how they come about to serve his own ends, but the underlying thing the underlying premise of his statement he's able to prove empirically.
It's also very reminiscent of the Bush years, where it was, if you see something, say something, and then Rio says to if people are acting differently than you, kill them. They're clearly demons. The parallels are unnerving.
There's a lot of unnerving parallels to people to anyone in power. I mean, you mentioned there was some justifiable or not paranoia during the Bush years. There was a lot of exploitation that went under in the Obama years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to get overly political, but I don't think for the entirety of my lifetime, since I've been cognizant of the political process, I don't think there's been a president I've actually been able to support.
Yeah, it's. I tried to explain to somebody today. It's like, it's not that I support Trump. It's just that all this vitriol and hatred you're spewing in his direction, there are parallels to other presidents for the last at least 40 years. Like, calm the fuck down.
Yeah, and one of the other, not to get too overly political, but, when it comes to Trump, people saying he's the worst president ever, like, oh, please. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's good, okay?
No.
I'm saying, based on all available evidence right now, he did not lay groundwork for a literal 5-year war between the states. He didn't. James Buchanan, thank you, jackass. He didn't empirically set back our relations with other global powers, leading to severe military conflict. He didn't. There's, again.
I'm assuming you're talking about Woodrow Wilson,
among others.
Okay.
What I just said actually applies to a shockingly high number of American presidents.
Okay.
Again, Woodrow Wilson, Thomas Jefferson, because some of whose policies set the stage for the War of 1812. Point being, and to be clear, I'm also not calling Thomas Jefferson a bad president. I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about errors in judgment in certain instances. Trump, good president? No, not really, I don't think. The worst, that is ahistorical nonsense. Anyway, point about this, and I do think that, if there is a bit of a parallel I was going to draw between Rio and Trump, it would actually be this. Rio is a character that understands the importance of making sure what he says is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
To, he has a Twitter account.
Right.
To the shock of no one, the devil is on Twitter.
Speaking of which. Speaking of our dear president.
And my point being that he understands the character, understands a lot of what I'm trying to do, especially the original stages, they're going to shut me down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether because there are actual demons in control of of the media institutions, which we do see, who are trying to keep their existence a secret and oppose my plans, or because they just don't believe it, or they're worried about FCC sanctioning violations if they happen to show some of these horrible things. Whatever the consideration is. And there's a lot of people who have started gravitating towards that particular understanding and understand the importance of mass communication like that. And again, I know Miki's not a great character, but to see someone on the other side who understands the ability to use that same interconnectivity for good is another really important thing. In fact, if we're going to look at this as the grand game of chess that Akira thinks is checkers, and that he and Rio are on the same side of the board, he does. It's one of the things that he doesn't really get. He doesn't really have a method of conveying what he's trying of his message. He doesn't understand how to help get that out. He's at a loss, and he's partially as a result, perpetually behind the 8 ball.
One of the fascinating things about this show is how many times they dangle peace in front of the audience. So, like, for example,
they do.
You have Akira as Devilman, and he's standing amongst people, and he's kind of willing to take the slings and arrows, and, like, a kid, like, jumps in there and hugs him, and you're like, oh, it's going to be all right, because people... They kind of have like a Spartacus moment. They're like, I'm Spartacus.
You do get the moment of, there are... People can be reached. We can...
Right.
These people are scared, and they're violent, and they're acting out because they don't know what else to do, and they're in a group. And the average IQ of any group of people greater than about 10 drops 5% for every like power of 10 that they go up. Like I forget the exact statistic on that, but they've done the research on this. There's, and not to quote the famous line from Men in Black, but it is still true. A person is smart. People are dumb, dangerous, panicky animals, and you know it.
And so that scene, I believe, ends in violence. Like, it all goes to shit very quickly.
It works for all the people do stop. Like, they stop and they, like, start meeting with each other, like, oh, and they kind of have that brief moment of, you know, what the hell were we doing?
Right.
And then the demons attack. Because Xenon sees a chance to kill Akira, and Akira winds up killing him. But juxtaposed with that bit of hope is the mob showing up at Miki's.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I like that, you know, there's that one episode that ends with Akira taking the his name I can never remember, this character, taking the other Devilman off and going, you know what, after he lies to Ryo about killing him, like, you're like me, you're not gone, you can control this, I can save you. And of course that goes badly. that eventually goes badly. There's some real there are touching moments. There's one, you know, from the demon side after he mutilates Cyrene, when her, you know, chauffeur assistant comes up to her in his demon form and goes, you know, we can merge bodies. And her response is, you moron. That means all the damage I've accumulated will merge too, and we'll both die. And all he does is say, yeah, I'm okay with that. If it'll bring you victory here and happiness, I'm willing to do that. And that, you know, that's kind of the moment when Akira winds up talking with Ryo after that, going, do you think demons can feel love? And Ryo's response is, I doubt it. Yeah. They're beings of pure instinct, which is kind of his argument. And love, which is another big theme of the show, love is a very non-instinctual thing. Mm-hmm. You know, you feel, how do I say this? Love is almost learned, right? It is the ability to set aside the instinct for the sake of someone else. You know, you are protective of your children, and in fact, most, you know, not all creatures, but, you know, most, certainly mammals, are protective of their children to a certain point. That doesn't necessarily mean there is love in the way we understand it. It means it's almost like a programmed response to ensure the continuation of the species, because over enough iterations, this is the best way to propagate us and make sure we continue. Love is it's a
civilizing emotion.
Yeah, I mean, love is a very. I know there's a bunch of people out there who have, like, no, but there's brain scans of dolphins. Like, just shut up and listen to me, okay, for a second, please. I'm not saying animals are incapable of emotion, of devotion, but love is a very human thing. And I think most of the animals that you find that that you would try to attribute love to are domesticated animals, are things that humanity has been in close proximity with for a long period of time, and that's kind of where it comes from. So, you know, the question that Akira is asking is a very, very interesting one, in that it's one that I think we all have to confront on an existential level and a personal level. You know, can you set aside the instinct and the impetus for love? You know, are you capable of that? Because even the people that we see do terrible things, you know, that's really what's been lost more than anything else. They have subsumed their own capacity for love in the name of fear. They have given in to the instinct, and, you know, the surpassing, you know, nobility and purpose of man, if you want to go with me on this line, it is to overcome those. It is to be able to love one another. And I actually do. This is one of the things about the show that the more I think about it, the more I appreciate. While there is a certain, you know, there are romantic sparks between Akira and Miki, it never goes beyond that, and I actually do like that. because
it's very pure. It's very innocent.
Because it allows his love for her to be bigger than just I'm physically attracted to you.
Yeah.
And you see it. There's another scene that kind of conveys the same thing when, in one of the most deliberately gut punching segments, when the little boy becomes a demon and is eating his mother, and his father finds him.
Yeah, that is a rough sequence of events.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But he's sitting here and he's got a weapon that he took, and society's already starting to fall apart. And he's looking at this, and his son in his demon form is crying, and he's like, "I have to put you down because you're a demon." But he can't bring himself to do it because that's still my kid. And in fact, when the military shows up that's tasked with with killing the demons, and they say, get out of the way, there's a demon in there, his response is instinctual at this point. His love is so internalized, it's instinctual, is, please don't, that's my son in there, even though he's eating my wife. And again, that capacity for love that humanity has is one of the most important things. And I love that this show doesn't make it, because it makes sex such a primal part of it, of the discussion it's having. The fact that it did differentiate between love and lust the way that it does, I actually do want to applaud the showrunners for that, because it would have been very easy to go to kind of let that slip, to go the other direction, to muddle that a little bit. And I think the message of the show as it pertains to love is so far beyond the physical or the romantic, even, to how we're supposed to feel about each other. And that's kind of all I've got on that. So
okay. Anything else you want to get into before we wrap up for the night? Because we've been going at this a while. We've covered a lot of territory. I mean, this show definitely lends itself to long form discussion, but I don't know if a 3-hour podcast is really the best way to do that. So I'm going to give you the last word here, and then we'll wrap. Or if you have any questions for me.
I think the only question I would have for you is there any character or any bit of the show that we haven't touched on that you think warrants a mention?
No. I think the four main, Rio, Kira, Miki, and Miko. I mean, everybody else, I think... There's nobody else that truly irritated me. They were kind of in there and they were out there. They played a role. Like I said, I don't have too many criticisms of the show. Some of them are nitpicks. Some of them are like, not sure I would have done that. But I think the problem, like I said, we've said earlier in the show, there might be things due to translation. There might be things that just due to, well, that's how the genre is. So, but overall, I liked it. I think by the end of it, I was like, oh, I see where this is going now, and I kind of just wanted to get there. And it's funny because I watched it straight through from episode 1 to episode 9, and I miscounted, so I thought 9 was the last episode.
That would have been an interesting place for that. Well, episode 9 also, in the end credits, actually, I don't know if you watched them. That bit with Miki on the back of the motorcycle with Akira.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually the ending to the 1970s anime.
I almost would have been okay with the show had it just ended there. The last episode of... And I in retrospect, I can see where you need the very last episode. But had I not known it was there, I would have been okay with 9 being the last one because of how it ends.
9 is... Oddly enough, 9 is the emotional climax.
Right.
Like, 10 is actually more of a come down from what happens in 9.
I think that's why I was like, I don't need this. Like, I got what I needed from the show in the first 9 episodes. That last one almost feels like an epilogue. And I think to the degree to which you are invested in the relationship between Rio and Akira relates to, I think, how well you enjoy that last episode. Because the heartbreak you feel when he realizes Akira's dead, I think can be heartbreaking for the viewer. It wasn't to me because I wasn't that invested in that relationship. There were other parts of the show that resonated with me. That wasn't one of them, especially when you had previously seen the two of them go at it, and Akira's having like a breakdown, and he's telling him, "Don't be ridiculous, you're a human too." Once he turned into Satan, I was like, all right, get to the end.
It almost does. I'm loath to overly criticize episode structure, but one does wonder if there wasn't a slightly different way you could time this thing out to where your 9th episode ends not with Miki's death, but with her death and then him confronting Rio, and then your big cliffhanger is him going, sorry, not a human, actually. I am the devil.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if like a flash forward and then flashback and then end on Miki's death maybe has a stronger ending. But just to put a fine point on this, because you can hear I'm starting to go. I think if you can appreciate anime and are willing to sit with confrontational television, this is worth a view. This is pretty deep. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot to think about. I think if you're just looking for sort of a passive entertainment, something to kind of kill the quarantine, boy, is this not the show for you.
This show is heavy. It's deep. It's not easy. And that's part of the stuff I like about it. I enjoy a good popcorn movie. I enjoy stuff that I can use as background noise while I do other stuff in their place. I also really enjoy stuff like this in its place. And everyone is that way to one degree or another. So, yeah, that's going to basically wrap us up here. I do wonder if I could pitch you another series by the same director.
Okay.
It is essentially the opposite of this. It is the most wholesome thing you could watch, I think.
Okay.
One of them.
So the first 5 episodes isn't going to be full of tits?
No.
Well, so far it's a hard sell.
It's I think one of the most recent things he's done. He's got something else coming out later this year, but one that came out, I think it started in January. It's limited. It's only 13 episodes, and it is essentially a.
Is it on Netflix?
What? No.
Okay.
I can. I think it's free on. It's free on Crunchyroll.
Okay.
In its entirety, so you wouldn't have to, sign up for anything. It's essentially a love letter to the process of making animated movies.
Okay.
It's about 3 high school girls, each of whom winds up representing one part of the process of the process of getting these things made, who form a film study club, and they all like anime, but there's an anime club already, and it's full of people who just like watching it and they want to actually make it.
Okay.
So you have one who's big into world building and internal consistency and figuring out the world. You have one that's more on the technical side who likes drawing, who likes the process of animation, who wants to make things that look lifelike. And then you have the producer, who is, I think, everyone's favorite character, who occasionally has to slap them upside the head and go, "This has to be done in a week and a half. Stop it. We have a budget." So you have the producer.
Okay.
And it's just, again, it's just kind of a love letter to the process of how you make, and again, because it's Japanese, it is focused on anime, but I think a lot of the same stuff is applicable to Western animation as well.
Yeah, that sounds fun. What's it called?
It's just a love letter. It's called Keep Your Hands Off Isaacan.
Okay.
Isaacan, in this case, being the name of Film Study Film Club. And keep your hands off because they're constantly kind of trying to be shut down by the student council and whatnot. So again, just like wholesome hijinks, and there's like 3 arcs within the 13 episodes, each of which concludes with the animation that the girls have been making being debuted. And most episodes, again, they start fairly normally, and then there comes a point when they will get into the creative process, and the visual style alters radically to kind of represent how into the process they get.
Okay.
And again, there's fun stuff. There's hijinks. I really do kind of maintain that I think you'll love. I forget the character's name, but our capitalist producer, who is constantly having to rein the artistic types in. Like, okay, stop. I understand your artistic desire to make this look as perfect as possible, but we're running out of time and money. So if you actually want to finish the darn thing, how about we stick to the schedule? And okay, fine, but then I need this. I need this bit of equipment, and fine, I will deal with that. You just stick to the schedule. I'll make everything else happen. So if we find time on the schedule for that, I again, it's very different from this. It's entirely wholesome.
Okay. No, I like this idea. This sounds fun. So I'll look at the schedule and we'll figure it out. In the meantime, I think that's going to be the end of tonight's discussion. Tomorrow, Jesse's back. We're going to be doing Ailstorm, Curse of the Crystal Coconut. Yesterday, myself and Alexis Hana reviewed Catwoman When in Rome, which is the parallel to Batman Dark Victory, which was the sequel to Batman The Long Halloween, and the predecessor to Batman Hush. Thursday, myself and Pat Mullen will be doing our next chapter of the boxing series we've been doing on the Heavyweight Championship of the World. We'll be looking at Smokin' Joe Frazier. Have you listened to Chapter 7? Did you listen to the Scramble for Ali's title?
I did.
What'd you think?
I enjoy the series as you guys have been doing it. I would consume a lot more of it, but you guys have to have a schedule in which you can produce. So,
yes, indeed. Sorry. Next week, myself and Alexis Hana will be doing a comic strip for The Last Days of American Crime. The Netflix movie comes out this Friday. We're going to read the book, we're going to watch the movie, and then we're going to discuss it. The Podsman and I will be reviewing NXT TakeOver in Yo House on Tuesday. And then Thursday, myself and Pat Mullen will be reviewing the final part of Fuller House Season 5. So that's what we've got going on both this week and this last week. Myself and Alexis Hana reviewed The Three Caballeros Ride Again. There was a review of AEW Double or Nothing, and Legends of the Three Caballero cartoon series that's currently on Disney+. I am desperately running out of oxygen. Do your plug so we can get out of here.
All right. You can find my full report for last Saturday's UFC on ESPN 9. Damn it. Give me a little bastard. Mark actually joined me on Sunday for the 411 Ground and Pound podcast, where we reviewed all of that action, previewed UFC 250, and talked about news of the week, like John Jones and the UFC having yet another flare-up. This one seems pretty serious. So, again, we'll see how that plays out, but we talked about that. We talked about the state of the bantamweight division a little bit. We talked about the end of the Reebok deal and what that could mean. We also lampooned that deal for being terrible, because, yeah, it was. So you can find all that if you're interested in Mark and I gabbing about MMA. This Saturday is UFC 250, current plan. I will be in the MMA zone of 411 Mania covering it. I've taken on a couple of wrestling review duties, so when the NWA stuff gets back to being worth reporting on, I will be reviewing their shows, but that's not the case at the moment. On the other hand, there is MLW, which is airing a lot of anthologies. I have one up for their anthology on Low Key, and we'll have one up for the upcoming one on gentleman's name escapes me at the moment. But the one that comes out on this coming Saturday, so my review should be up sometime Sunday. And yeah, if you're interested in my reviews of MLW anthologies until they start airing new content again, you can find me over there. So hope you do. I appreciate whatever support you guys can throw my way. And yeah, I think that's it for me. So
All right.
that's all the plugs I've got.
See, this was fun. You were a little afraid that this was going to go south in a hurry, but I thought we had a very nice discussion about a property you're very passionate about, and I was happy to have it with you.
Yeah, I mentioned this to Mark. A few days before we were supposed to have this show, about a week out, I started going, "This is a terrible idea. Whatever discussion we wind up having about this is probably not going to be very productive or interesting." And then you reacted a little bit differently than I anticipated.
You thought I was going to hate this, didn't you?
A little bit, yeah. I thought.
Can you to 50 words or less? And I literally mean 50 words or less. Mm-hmm. Why did you think I was going to hate this? Because this was a fairly straightforward narrative, which, as you've picked at me for, is really in my wheelhouse.
I thought the art style would be too big a hurdle for you.
Nah, I knew going into it. Look, if you tell me we're gonna go to a Asian fusion restaurant, I don't go in thinking I'm gonna get a pizza, and then get mad that it's Asian food.
Even by anime standards, this is very psychedelic, experimental, surrealistic art style.
Okay, if you insist, I didn't get that.
Okay, fair enough. Again, I clearly I was mistaken about this, but I did kind of genuinely think that one of your big complaints coming out of this would be, this looks like my son drew it.
No, not this. I mean, it was just talking specifically about the actual animation, the style of drawing.
Yeah,
I didn't think it looked that different from any other anime I've ever seen.
Wow.
Look, not for nothing, but if it's uglier than Tolkien, we're gonna have a problem. Short of that, I'm okay. Not Tolkien, Jesus Christ.
I know what you mean.
Rankin and Bass.
Yeah, I know what you meant. Okay, fair enough. So, to be fair, the art style is a hurdle for some people because and if you really value, realism in your art, this is not for you. It's very not. So I figured that might be a bit of a hard thing. You'd watch the first couple of scenes and go, okay, what? From just a purely visual perspective. But clearly, again, I was mistaken on that front. I think that was kind of a big one, was between the art style and the very depressing end. I thought you might kind of go why the hell did you even pitch this to me? It looks like crap and everyone dies.
Yeah, no. Well, I know you well, so I knew why. There was no question there.
Okay, so why I pitched it to you, not necessarily, but I did kind of expect you to message me after you were done watching it and go, I never want to hear you complain ever again about any of the terrible stuff I make you watch.
No, first of all, I know that this is the last thing I'm going to say, that I'm literally going to hit the stop button. But there's stuff I make you watch that really pains you. It's really, you seem to, have to walk into the street and bang your head against a light pole when I'm done. There's very few things on Earth that affect me that much.
I have, to be fair, all joking and gimmickry aside, I have never walked out of a movie you've made me see and had to strike myself in the head with anything.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Several have made me wish I had. But I value my brain.
Fair enough.
And again, if I could purge the memory of Transformers Age of Extinction or The Last Night by breaking one of my fingers, I absolutely would.
Right.
But I can't, so I don't.
I mean, maybe later this year when we do the Babadook, I might turn back to you and go, But for why? What have I done to you to deserve this? But
you know better than to ask what have you done to deserve it.
yeah, well, that's the point. So it's more of even if I might have had that inclination, it's tempered with I kind of asked for this. And with that said,
fair enough. I am very interested in what your reaction to the Babadook is going to be.
Well, probably it's frightening, and now I'm scared I'm going to have nightmares. But until the people can laugh at me in October. All right, I want to thank Robert for spending 2.5 hours of his night with me. Go ahead and watch.
I wasn't going to do anything else with it anyway.
With that said, be well, be safe, and behave.